So we're talking about Cheshbon Hanefesh. We're actually learning the Chovot Halevavot, but we've taken a little break to learn Cheshbon Hanefesh, accounting of the soul. And I photocopied the introduction, the Peticha. You got the Peticha?
Yeah.
Peticha means the introduction.
What's the difference between that and a Hakdama?
A Hakdama is like often a foreword written by someone else.
Okay.
And then the Peticha is the introduction written by the author. But sometimes I think I wrote a Hakdama and a Peticha of my own book. When you go for a walk on the banks of the river, Ata might say, you will come across a valley that is full of reeds and reeds. Yam Suf is not the Red Sea, by the way. Did you know that? Yam Suf is the Reed Sea, and it got misquoted at some point, and they called the Red
like
Sea.
Those tall grass.
Yeah, grass with the little thing. So you come. There's a whole valley full of these reeds. Shekulam oimdot kufot zay etzel zay. They're all standing up. That one next to that one. A whole field of these reeds. Ve'ein koyach be'echad mehem le'aziz atzma. Afilu k'malei sa'ara achas mima'ada. And not one of them has any power to move itself, even a tiny bit, from where it is. What?
It can go up, it can go out.
Well, that's not moving itself.
Okay.
It's being moved. Even their growth. Even if you want to say that, they're not doing their growth. But we're talking about side to side now. It's standing there, it can't move at all. It has no power to move. It's completely immobile. However, a tiny little bit later, Al Yadei Neshivat Ruach Kolshehu, with the most tiny little wisp of wind. Kolshehu, a tiny little wisp of wind. Nireh kol penei shetach elyon mizazdeo midmoed elach ve'elach legalei hayam. You'll see the whole field of reeds like just flowing and swaying like waves in the sea. It's so good, so poetic, so good. She'ein koyach be'echad mehem litchazek kenegdai, because none of them has any power to stand up against the wind. Once that wind comes, the reed can't be like resistance, push against it. It's just like v'la'amod al amda. It can't stand in its standing. Afilu rega kameimra. Even for a tiny little moment. No wind, no movement, wind, movement. Kain hu nefesh habehemis. That's just like your own animal soul. Your Yetzirah, your animal soul. She'ein ba ruach eitza gvura lanoach ulenua ma'atzma mikoyach bechirata. Because your animal soul, your lower cravings, has no power of free choice. Nothing. It's just a reed. It's an animal. Ela mitma'etet v'holechet techev al yedei hisoyerus is a nidnud ruach taiva utza'ar. But rather what happens is it suddenly starts being active and moving. Immediately, when there's a little bit of an arousing, hisoidus is one of my favorite words. Hisoidus. Arousing. Hisoideri. It's a geschmack word. The root of the word is air, which means to wake. To be awake. So when they say you want to daven with hisoidus. You want to daven with vitality. But once there's any awakening of any tiny little bit of taiva, desire, craving, utzar, or pain, hamut ba'im ba betchila briyata, that is put in its nature as soon as it's created. Ushenase la teva mulumedet al yedei hergel orech. By the way, you're just going to see this, how amazing this is. Or it has now created it teva mulumedet, a learned nature. So we'd call that maybe a second nature. You have a nature that you're born with, and then you have a second nature, which is you've trained yourself, so we call that nurture. Nature and nurture. So now, as soon as its nature and nurture are aroused by taiva and tsar, by craving and pain, then it moves. It either moves to get away from pain, or it moves to grasp the pleasure that it wants. And they can't not do that. Your nefesh behemi, your animal soul, your animal lowly side, has no self-control, basically. That's what I was saying. Just like a reed has no self-control, it can't choose to stay still in wind, and it can't choose to move in no wind. So too, your animal soul is an animal. Animals don't have free will. So many people who aren't training themselves and refining themselves as human beings, they're just animals. They're not that much better than animals. They're just going with what I feel like. Complete control by emotions. Ad shehisbia ed taivatea, until you've satisfied your craving. Ufasku kol hargashatea, and you've got rid of all your feeling. You like say you're just walking around like an animal, satisfying your desire or avoiding pain. Now you're obviously not doing that, because for example when you go to the gym, you're overcoming that because it's painful, and you're doing it though it's painful. You're getting out of bed even though it's difficult to get out of bed. So at that point you're exercising your bechira, your free choice of your neshama. It's basically what's in control, your animal or your animal soul or your godly soul. Now your animal soul is just an animal, can't do anything on its own. Your godly soul can override that. So I ran a trip once to Nicaragua, beautiful country. I actually ran 5 trips there. But one of the trips I ran there was this neurosurgeon. He wasn't a neurosurgeon yet, he was in Hillel. Penn Hillel, a neuro-brain student person. And he said, we don't have free will. Humans don't have free will. I'll prove it to you because I can touch parts of your brain and I can mess with your synapses and your stuff, and that would just change what you think, what you remember, how happy you are, how sad you are. So basically your whole experience of reality is just a chemical reaction. It's a chemical and electrical reaction, which is trained from your nature and your nurture. Basically, you're born with some whatever it is, and so whatever situation you are in, I can pretty accurately predict what you're going to do based on your nature and your nurture and your synapse and your this, and I can even control that and override that. And I said, I believe that too. I just believe that we have a soul as well that you can't measure in your science lab, and the soul can override that. So even if those synapses are saying eat that, do that, then your soul can say I'm going to completely go against that. And he'd say no, because that was programmed in you that you had enough discipline to go against that. And I say yes, I hear that as well. I think that is part of it. I just think there's a nakuda bechira. There is a point where you can actually make a decision not at all based on cause and effect. You say you can bring down everything from cause and effect, so really we don't have free will. And I say no, 95% of things I would say are cause and effect, but there's 5% of things where you actually did go against what all of the causes and all of the effect, they didn't. Jewish belief. So he said to me, prove it. So I said to him, I don't need to prove it, you need to prove it. He said, why do I need to prove it? And I said, because you're the one who's saying something that goes against our experience of life. Our experience of life is that we do have free will. You'd be upset with me if I slept with your girlfriend. I don't think I said that, or maybe I probably did. You'd be upset with me if I punched you in the face. And he was like, yeah. And I said, but why? If I don't have free will, then why would you be upset with me? I was just a robot. Do you feel proud of yourself when you get up in the morning early and go for a run? Yeah. Why? That's just your synapses. So you should never feel proud of yourself. You should never feel upset with yourself. You should never feel angry with anyone else. You should never have any... So what I'm saying is, you live in a world that is completely a free will world. That's your experience of life. That's your friendships. That's why you don't like people. That's why you do like people. That's why you respect yourself. That's why you don't. Our whole life, you're living in a free will reality. So we both got a theory that makes sense, is logical sense. But my one makes logical sense and it's in line with reality, your experience of reality. Yours makes logical sense and it's not in line with your experience of reality at all. So, I'm not saying mine's right, but you're the one who has to prove that yours one's right. You have to prove that. And you can't prove that. You put on tefillin. Did by the end of the trip. Okay. Actually, I'd like to reach out to him. I haven't spoken to him for a long time. He's a really, really nice guy. Baruch Hashem. Now he's the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir, 15 children. No, that's just how those stories always end. So basically he's saying, but in his world, because you don't have a soul, you've only got an animal, you're just an animal. You're basically a trained animal. And by the way, you can retrain an animal. You can get an animal to sit and do things, but you need some external punishment force, really. A hungry dog cannot choose to not eat if there's food there. But if you hit it enough, when it starts to try to eat, then it can do it, but it's not choosing then. You just trained it not to do that. By the way, we said that you've got to train your Yetzer Hara. That's part of what we're doing. Train it. Smack it down. Vaz, we're in the middle of the second paragraph. Vaz, hi nikpa'ed b'ter damot ha'atzlut. And then, once it's fulfilled all its desires, it just goes lazy, it falls asleep, it's just dead at that point. It's like, okay, it basically gets, hey, you're like, yeah, and then after you do it, you're suddenly like, you're just like, no energy anymore, you're not happy, you're not fulfilled, you're not full of vitality, you're an animal, basically. So that's what animals do. They basically run around, eat, sleep, which babies kind of do as well, but not, hopefully, grown-up human beings, hopefully. And if there is no external force, such as taiva or tsar, pain or pleasure, then it doesn't move, it just sits there. It's like waiting for some awakening, which is unlike your neshama. Your neshama is always immensely and vitally awake. Your neshama is always burning passionately. It doesn't need some external thing. It is the energy force of vitality. Practically, maybe your breath is keeping that vitality there, but your neshama isn't dependent on external things to arouse it. Its natural state of being is one of immense spiritual arousal. And it's just stuck in this body, so you don't feel it. It's like weighed down by the body. So the more you invest in your body, the more you're kind of weighing down your neshama, the more you're feeding your Yetzer Hara, you're feeding your animal. The more that your whole life is just all about eating and sleeping, and you're just making your animal stronger and stronger and stronger and harder to beat. That's why we do believe there is a space for starving the animal. A little bit. And not too intense, but yeah. But just to back off a little bit. Back off. עד שיבוא איזה רוח כלשהו של הגרשה וטייבה וקיצנה, until another little wave of I just feel like that comes along, and it just has to be a little one, and then suddenly you're awake again and you're like, yeah, I want that. So really our whole lives are the arousal of desire and trying to fulfill that desire and not being happy when you do. Funny. Ay, shalom aleichem. Oh, you would have loved it. Oh, now listen to this. By the way, this is what we've been talking about for a long time. Just want to see something. This was published in 1845. Before you were born, children. Yeah. Not before I was born, but.
One of us were born.
וכשפויגים בה שתי רוחות הפוכות. What happens if two opposite winds touch the reed? So, I was thinking about this when I was learning this. It's one of two things. If they're equal and opposite, you might just be stuck. You're just like, I don't know. The reed would stand still, but it's very rare that happens. So he just says, Azahi nichna'ad lahayoter chazaka shebehem ba'oto shah. It just goes after the one that's a bit stronger in that moment. So I always talk about this. You always actually have two opposite winds in you, because you've got your nefesh and your neshama, and you're the ruach. By the way, this fits in perfectly to the middle part of your soul, which we actually identify with in this world being called the ruach. So the ruach is being blown around. So you want to get out. What it's basically saying is you want to get out of bed, but you want to stay in bed. You want to smoke it, you don't want to smoke it. You want to watch it, you don't want to watch it. You want to say that, you don't want to say that. You want to eat that, you don't want to eat that. This is what it's saying. When you have two opposing desires, which you always do because you have a neshama as well, then you just go with whichever is stronger, but otosha, in the moment. Because you're an animal. This is the Yetzer Hara. You can obviously overcome this, but the Yetzer Hara, the animal soul, will just do the stronger one. No self-control. I just doing that. No thinking, no contemplating. Lefi shehi mechuseret bina, because it doesn't have any power of contemplation. Mechuseret bina. You can't think about it and weigh it up and contemplate and see, is this really good for me? What's the right thing to do? I'm just an animal. I get triggered, I go and do that like an animal. Lihiyot ro'eh et hanolad, to be someone who sees the birth, literally, but that means consequences. Ro'eh et hanolad, this is from Pirkei Avot, by the way, famous lashon. That's actually, there are two different. In that one is Ezeu Chacham Halomed Mikol Adam. It says, which is the best way to be? Ma derech yeshara. Something like that. Ro'eh hanolad. Nice. Look at this. This is what's pouring out of you now. It used to be whatever it used to be. I don't even know. And now it's just Pirkei Avos, sukkahs on boats, everything. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Because you can't see the concept. You're not looking ahead at all. ומחוסרת עצה וגבורה לדחות אפילו הנאה כלשהי. You don't have the advice, literally. You don't have the advice or the strength, the self-control to push away any little pleasure, even a little bit. כלשהי. של עכשיו. Now basically means superficial, temporary, present, immediate, that's it. Immediate pleasure. You don't have the power to push away the immediate pleasure, mipnei tzar, because of your pain, or hana kayemet la'atid, in order to avoid pain and get real pleasure of self-respect and personal growth in the future. This is exactly what we've been saying all the time. Now I remember where I got it from. I read this years ago. So I wasn't just making stuff up. Amazing. I love reading this because I'm like, that's where I got it from. People sometimes say to me, what's your source for that? And I'm like, Chazal. Torah says. Our sages. I actually just say, our sages tell us. I had no idea who, where, but I remember I read it somewhere once. Happened to be Osho or something. God forbid. Chas v'shalom. Oh, we don't have so much time. So listen to this very quickly. Uchimat she'ein lehem lebalei hachayim yitron al hatzmechim v'domimim. Animals actually have very, very little advantage over plants and rocks, because none of them have free will. None of them are God conscious. So they have very little. Now, obviously, they can feel and they have a bit more. But he's saying, in general, in this way, Because me'achar she'ein behem koyach lanuach v'lanua, they don't have any power to move or stay still, ulehisha'ad tnu'atan b'chol shu, or even stop moving at all. V'nesha behem shelem nedchit techev k'kaneh v'suf. So their power is just completely waved around by like a reed. No difference to animals. They're basically no difference to reeds being blown around by the wind. If they feel something, they do it. That's it. They don't stop and contemplate. Is this the right thing to do? No cat was ever sitting there thinking, you know what? Is this the right thing to do? No God, no dog. Oh my goodness. No dog before it peed on the pavement, on the sidewalk, was like, is this really okay? And it seems like no dog owner does it either for some reason. We can do that. You had a question?
Yes. If we make a good decision, we receive a reward. If we make a decision in favor of evil, we receive punishment.
Consequences.
Yeah. Where is the free will? It's
in the decision.
But it's not free will.
I'll tell you it's free will because you don't receive the reward or the punishment straight away. You're right. If every time I did something good, suddenly bing, there was $1,000 in my bank account, and every time I did something bad, suddenly boom, I got smashed by lightning, then I wouldn't have free will. But the reward and the punishment or the consequences aren't immediate, and they're often after you die. You never see them, so that's why we still have free will. But that's a very good question. Just a very good answer as well. Oh, very good question. Thank you. So watch this quickly. Oh, I didn't give you this. Very quickly, what he goes on to say, I didn't give you the rest of the thing, is that you have to treat your Yetzer Hara like an animal. You have to hit it if you need to. Not that you should hit animals, by the way. I don't think you should. But in the mashal, in the analogy of the thing, you got to tie it up when it needs to be tied up. But, and this is why I like it very much, maybe I'll photocopy it for tomorrow. He says, but you also have to untie it when you need to untie it. Wise masters, where is it? Wise masters, haba'alim apekchim chasim. I'm not going to read it all because we don't have time. But basically it says, wise masters don't overburden their animals. I.e., don't try and jump to a level that you're not on. We're not tzaddikim yet. So sometimes you read a story of a tzaddik and he fasted from Shabbos to Shabbos, and you're not on that level. It would be very, very unwise to do that. And I see people do that and they can't, it's not sustainable. They come and they become Baal Tshuva, and it was too quick and too unhealthy, and then a year later they're not. So you can't overburden it, but you also can't underburden it. You can't be too just justify everything. That's what we were saying the other day in the Chovot Halevavot. So if you've got an animal that's meant for work, but you're not working it, and you're just letting it do what it does, then the animal's going to be in control. The Vilna Gaon uses the example of a horse. The Yetzer Hara is a horse, and you're the horse rider. Who's in control? Well, it depends. If you're a good rider, then you're in control, and you need the horse. You can go places very quickly with the horse. But if you're not in control, then you can't. So you've got to know how tightly to hold the reins. If you hold the reins too tightly, then it's not going to work either. If you hold the reins too loose, then the horse is in control. There's the right amount of what it means to hold. So that's very important in your Jewish growth as well. So if people come into yeshiva and after one day they're wearing tzitzit, and that's weird, I don't think that's healthy. But if you've been in yeshiva for 8, 9, 10 months, and you're still not wearing tzitzit, I'm going to be like, I'm not going to push you, but what are you doing here? Do you know it's true? I don't know what the balance is, but I'm not saying the perfect amount is 4 months. It's different for different people, but you have to know yourself well enough. And we've always said this, it always has to be from a place of consciousness and joy. If you can take something on joyfully and consciously, then that's good. If you're taking it on because other people are, or I feel pressure or guilt or fear, it's not how you're not ready for that. But at some point you've got to be moving. You've got to get this balance. Control the animal.
What's a good example of letting out the animal? Because like for me now, all I do is exercise. So kind of the only thing I can think of.
That's nice, but that's even good. I'd say having a beer with your friends on Thursday night, not in Ben Yehuda Street, just on the balcony. Have some beers and some cake. Yeah. I'm being really nice, by the way. But really, that's cool. Just be chill. Like, if you're like, no, I'm going to learn all day, all the time. Letting out the animal, watch programs, but watch like wilderness survival programs rather than.
Can I watch The Prince of Egypt because of the Parsha right now?
Yeah, I did with my kids actually last year.
It's such a good movie.
It's yeah, but my daughter was like, "That's not the midrash says."
Awesome.
It was awesome. That's why it was amazing. And all the Binyamin is like, "Oh, done," but Aaron wasn't like that, and it was good. It created a discussion.
That's awesome.
So yes, things like that. So the extreme would be, I'm never going to go on social media ever again. It's not necessarily healthy at this point. The other end is, I'm just going to stick my face in my phone all day. So there is a balance, which is, I'm definitely moving more to this side, and I'm going to be very selective in what social media I go on. And I'm going to have a filter, and I'm going to, whatever it is, and how much time. I'll never look at a screen again. Unsustainable. Spend all day looking at a screen. Stupid. Say I'd turn off my data between about 9:30 and 1. So if someone wants to contact me, they can call me, but I'm not doing that all day.
But you don't get WhatsApp between 9:30 and 1.
Well, they come, I don't look at them. If I, obviously, once again, here's healthy, if I know that there's a meeting that I might have to be at, then I'll turn it on, or my wife needs me, or whatever. But in general, I sent out to all the people, the management at Aish and all the people, if you need me between these hours, don't WhatsApp me, phone me. And then from about 2 till midnight, I'm just on my phone the whole time. Great, so we're moving. This is beautiful stuff, no?
Cool. I go on social media once a week now.
Nice. The author